Buster Posey has, I think, rightfully so, received a lot of the credit for the Giants' good start this season. But why? This is a roster made up almost entirely of players from, acquired from previous regimes, and the players he has brought in have struggled.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, hosting this show for over 6 years, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube, so check us out there if you have not already, and please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. And coming up on today's show, given that yesterday we broke down the game, the walk-off splash hit by Mike Yastremski, and just the series in general and the start the Giants are off to today with no game, and the Giants don't play until tomorrow afternoon, it was a question of what do we talk about? And I came up with something that has been on my mind, heavily on my mind, which is this team that is 9-3, and like I said, that I think Buster Posey has rightfully received a lot of credit for the way they've performed, is made up almost entirely of players that he had nothing to do with acquiring. Or, at the very least, we don't know how much of an influence he had in acquiring. Like, the one exception, besides the obvious ones like Willy and Justin Verlander, those guys obviously were brought in by Posey, and we'll get into them and how they've been among the worst players on the team to start the year. But there's more to it than just numbers, I would say, and that's what we'll ultimately conclude. But if you look at the composition of the roster, I was going to say the one exception would possibly be Matt Chapman. But originally, Matt Chapman was signed by the previous regime, Farhan Zaidi. And so when we talk today, I don't have any skin in the game here. I'm not rooting for any regime more than the other. I'm just trying to be objective about it. And there's also some players, I think really mostly just one. I'll look again. We'll go through the roster who are holdovers from the regime prior to the Farhan Zaidi regime. And so we're going to just take a look at the roster and try to be objective about why is Buster Posey getting so much credit when this roster wasn't really built by him? And also, what does it mean about long-term sustainability of if they have success this year, for example, do we have solid reason to believe that is a sustainable thing for many, many years to come? And so the point that I kind of want to make is that you look across this roster and you look at, for example, Mike Yastremski. He's a great example because he just hit a walk-off splash hit. He's been red hot. He's arguably been their best player, even better than Jung Hoo Lee, who we'll talk about in just a second. But Yaz represents the Farhan Zaidi era like nobody else. He was maybe there. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to all those small trades and waiver claims and stuff, Yaz is probably the best success story. He's carved out a nice career. He's hit 108 home runs. He's come to the plate over 2,500 times, played in over 700 games. He's got a 324 on base and a 459 career slugging, and all this for a guy who toiled away in the minor leagues for a bad team that just never gave him a shot. The Orioles were not good, and they just never gave Mike Yastremski a shot, and they really should have. So Farhan Zaidi And we don't know exactly how much credit to give to Zaidi. Like maybe Zach Manassian, who's now the Giants general manager, had a lot to do with targeting Yastremski. So we don't know exactly, but it certainly wasn't Buster Posey, who's like, yeah, go get Mike Yastremski out of the Orioles minor league system, right? And so then you look at a Lamont Wade Jr. He struggled to start the season, but none of these guys are like superstars, but they are part of the winning formula for the Giants. Lamont Wade Jr. acquired in a small trade by Farhan Zaidi, or when Farhan Zaidi was president of baseball operations. Jung Hoo Lee was I think the biggest signing of the free agent signing. There was the Matt Chapman extension, of course, of the Farhan Zaidi era. They gave Jung Hoo Lee, who entered last year and at age 25, a 6-year, $113 million contract plus posting fees that I think came out to about $20 million. And by the way, Jung Hoo Lee, it is a 6-year deal, but he can opt out after 2027. And so it's really a 3-year deal starting this year, and then he could opt out. But we'll worry about that later. Matt Chapman, like I said, originally brought in by Farhan Zaidi. The extension, this is where it gets a little bit of a blend of the two. We heard reporting that seems to be legitimate. There was some kind of conflicting reports, even from Scott Boras representing Matt Chapman, who said, look, Farhan and I got this deal to the finish line. And maybe it was Posey who stepped in and got it across the finish line, but still a joint effort, let's call it that. But originally signed by Farhan Zaidi and extended by a combination of Zaidi and Posey. I'm just going through the lineup. I skipped over Adames, but we're going to focus on him a lot in segment number 2, along with Justin Verlander, because those were their main, only really significant moves of the offseason. And then we get to Elliot Ramos, who is a holdover from the regime prior to Farhan Zaidi, the Bobby Evans and Brian Sabian regime. Elliot Ramos was drafted in 2017 in the first round, 19th overall. And that was well prior to Farhan Zaidi taking over after the 2018 season. So then there's Yaz. We already talked about him. Wilmer Flores, one of the better, you look around the game and you talk about value extracted in a free agent contract. Wilmer Flores has just been a great Giant, in my opinion, and I don't think I'm being hyperbolic. Again, not a star, but they have a lot of good complementary players. Like when they're good, we know Flores had the one down year last year, but if you just looking across the seasons that Flores has had, there's just no doubt Wilmer Flores has been a really good, solid Giant. No, he's not Aaron Judge, but to have a player like this, and given the contracts that they've given him, the total money that they've committed, it's not much. It's these have been really good moves. Somebody asked in a mailbag question. I'm not going to get into the mailbag right now, but the question was, is Tom Murphy the worst free agent signing that Farhan Zaidi ever made? Tom Murphy, the backup catcher, making $4 million a year. If that's the worst contract that you gave out, then you didn't do such a bad job. So a big part of what I'm trying to say is that Farhan Zaidi, I think, left this team in a much better position than people realize and give him credit for. And I get why he was fired. I think that it was, I don't know if I want to just say, yeah, it was definitely the right thing to do, because I do feel like they were in a better spot than people realized. And they just didn't play up to their potential. Last year, a lot of people expected that team to make the playoffs going into the season, and they just didn't get it done. But, and we'll get into some of the differences between Posey and Zaidi and how that may be the missing ingredient. If these two could have worked together, that may have been an ideal situation. But anyway, moving through the lineup, again, Patrick Bailey was drafted by the previous regime, the Farhan Zaidi regime. And again, we don't know exactly who's making the calls here. It's not necessarily Farhan Zaidi, but that was a very unpopular draft pick because everyone was like, what are they doing? They have Joey Bart, and also nobody really thought too highly of Patrick Bailey, but he's become kind of a star defensively, like a young Yadier Molina type, where he's just that impactful. Did I say offensively? Defensively is what I mean. And I think really the bat is better than he's shown, and if he can just be more consistent, then I think like he could legitimately be a star player. And Tyler Fitzgerald finally in this regular lineup, drafted in 2019, the first draft under Farhan Zaidi. And so again, I am not here trying to talk up the previous regime. I'm simply pointing out the facts of how this roster was constructed. So we will continue to roll through the roster and how it was made up, and then get into the players Posey brought in just a minute, and before we get into it. Today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you in part by Just Ingredients. When it comes to fueling your body, quality matters. That's why Just Ingredients is changing the game with clean, high-quality products designed to support better health and peak performance. Just Ingredients offers an NSF-certified line of protein powder, electrolytes, pre-workout, and creatine, all rigorously tested to ensure they're free from substances banned by major athletic organizations. Just Ingredients has also partnered with two-time MVP Bryce Harper, who trusts their NSF-certified sports line to fuel his training and recovery. And my good friend Tim has got his hands on Just Ingredients and cannot stop talking about how good it is. And I really have to get my hands on the vegan option, which I have heard great things about as well. So visit justingredients.us and use code LOCKEDONMLB for 20% off. And for more wellness tips, follow at just.ingredients on Instagram. All right, here we go. We're going to get into the rest of how this roster has been constructed, and then specifically zero in on Willy Adames and Justin Verlander, and how, again, without bias, I'm coming on here just saying those two players have been, if you look at like not underlying numbers, but just like results, like pure results, have been two of their worst players in this 9-3 start. So continuing on, we went through the whole like main starting lineup, and the only player in there that is fully attributable to Posey is Willy Adames. There is, of course, the Chapman extension, but otherwise, Elliot Ramos is the one previous regime before Zaidi, and then everyone else is a Farhan Zaidi product here. And then getting to the current bench composition, Sam Huff, that was actually a Buster Posey move. It was a waiver claim in January, but Sam Huff has struggled. I mean, he's hitting 154 with a 154 on base and a 154 slugging. So, he's yet to get it going, but I'm not going to judge him in his 13 plate appearances. Casey Schmidt, a Farhan Zaidi draft pick, second rounder in 2020. And I think Schmidt has a pretty bright future. Christian Koss, who has struggled, doesn't have a hit. The one player on this roster who doesn't have a hit yet was acquired by the previous regime in a trade in March of 2024. So another Farhan Zaidi pick. Luis Matos. Okay, here we go. So now, along with Elliot Ramos, Luis Matos was signed prior to Farhan Zaidi being hired. So there's two players that precede Farhan Zaidi. But what I'm trying to get at is people feel good about this team. The vibes are like high. And yet there's very little. And I'm saying I think a lot of it is attributable to Buster Posey. And yet you look at the roster, and I think it's just important to remember, I think, that they were left if you think about what the roster that Farhan Zaidi inherited, that roster was doomed, in my opinion. We can look back, like they were very expensive and not good. And this roster, there's so much more flexibility. They can go in multiple directions in the offseason because they're not tied down with like multiple bad contracts, which was what which was what Zaidi inherited. And instead, I think this is like an underratedly talented team, and it gets that, especially looking that way when we look at the pitching. So Logan Webb, that actually precedes Farhan Zaidi as well. Webb was drafted in 2014, but Farhan Zaidi got the extension done, and also they seemed to believe, like they knew that Logan Webb could be really good before other people kind of were thinking that. And then moving on in the pitching staff, Landon Roop. I just feel like the drafting by the Farhan Zaidi regime is kind of underrated, because you look at, like I said, Casey Schmidt, Tyler Fitzgerald, Landon Roop, Hayden Birdsong, Patrick Bailey, and then moves around the margins on like small trades like Mike Yastremski and Lamont Wade, a free agent signing, and Jung Hoo Lee. There's just a lot to like about the moves that the previous regime made. And how about Jordan Hicks and Robbie Ray? Those were also, Jordan Hicks was a free agent signing by Farhan Zaidi, and Robbie Ray was a trade that, in my opinion, looks rather savvy, considering the Giants gave up Mitch Haniger, who struggled in his 1 year back in Seattle and then was DFA'd by the Mariners and then unsigned. So, and also Anthony DeSclafani, who was then flipped to another team, I think maybe the Twins, and then got hurt and also is like unsigned. So those two players are basically out of baseball, and the Giants got a guy who won a Cy Young Award not very long ago and could be good. I mean, he's got bad underlying numbers this year, but the ERA is 3.18, so it remains to be seen how Robbie Ray performs. And I think we all see the upside of a Jordan Hicks. And then you've also got Justin Verlander in the rotation, and we'll focus on him a little bit later on. Ryan Walker, like the promotion of Ryan Walker, his being drafted preceded Farhan Zaidi. So that is another holdover from, that's how long it takes to like evaluate drafting and developing and like the job that a front office does. Like Ryan Walker, we're talking 2018. Logan Webb drafted in 2014. Tyler Rogers, the promotion of Tyler Rogers was a Farhan Zaidi move when he was in the Giants minor league system, not getting a promotion for years under the previous regime. He had been drafted in 2013 by the Giants, and he didn't get called up until 2019. And so definitely previous regime before Zaidi, but nevertheless, the promotion of Tyler Rogers and the promotion of Ryan Walker, that wasn't a given under the regime that preceded Zaidi. And then Eric Miller out of the pen, that was one of the Giants. In the first draft under Farhan Zaidi, they took Eric Miller in the fourth round, 120th overall. Camilo Doval, I believe he preceded Farhan Zaidi international signing in October 2015. But the belief in like adding him to the 40-man, protecting him from the Rule 5 draft, I know he struggled, but like the last couple years, but still the promotion and belief in him and then what he turned into. But then it's kind of turned sideways here recently. Lou Trevino, that's a Buster Posey era move. Randy Rodriguez, how did they acquire him? They got him, they signed him as an amateur in 2017, so it precedes even Farhan Zaidi. But adding him to the 40-man, protecting him from the Rule 5 draft, Randy Rodriguez has been unbelievable. And so, credit to two regimes prior to the Buster Posey regime on Randy Rodriguez. And then Hayden Birdsong is a draft pick by the Farhan Zaidi front office, was taken in the 6th round in 2022. So a lot of these picks, like Landa Roop and Hayden Birdsong, like underrated picks, and the Giants don't get a lot of credit, I think, because a lot of their first rounders have just not panned out, and that's been significant and is a big reason why Zaidi was let go. You look at Hunter Bishop and Bednar. I'm blanking on the first name because he has a brother who's also a major leaguer who was actually demoted recently himself, and Reggie Crawford, he's been injured, and there were others, but Bryce Eldridge, first round pick, remains to be seen. I mean, this guy could be a superstar. And Patrick Bailey, I think, was a really good first round pick. Kyle Harrison, a Farhan Zaidi front office pick. And so I feel like they don't get enough credit for what they've done. And it's just like the talent is now coming up, and it just takes that long. And so it's going to take that long to see under Posey what happens. And so that's just the way baseball is. Spencer Bivens, the last man on the major league roster, was signed as a free agent in May of 2022 out of independent ball. So, Farhan Zaidi pick. And then Gerard Encarnacion, also on the 40-man, Farhan Zaidi signing out of Mexico. And on and on and on and on and on. There's a lot to like. And then you look at the young pitching, Kyle Harrison, Keaton Wynn, Tristan Beck was acquired in a trade where they dumped Mark Melanson, Trevor McDonald, Carson Seymour, Carson Ragsdale, Mason Black. Keaton Wynn preceded Farhan Zaidi. Tristan Beck was acquired in that trade. And the Carsons, I think, were each acquired in a trade. And Mason Black, Carson Wisenhunt. Like, there's just so much, I think, to like about the state of the organization. And a lot of the reason their prospect rankings don't come in highly is because many of their better young players have graduated from prospectdom. And also, I think guys like Landa Roop and Hayden Birdsong are underrated. And so I guess it remains to be seen. Sean Jelly, I think, preceded the Farhan Zaidi regime, but yeah, he did. Second round pick after they took Bart in the first round in 2018. So there you have it. That's kind of the 40-man composition. It has Farhan Zaidi's fingerprints all over it, as you would expect, given that he was here for 6 years. And I don't know, they're off to this good start. The vibes are high. And yet the players that Posey has brought in have been among the worst players on the team. So why does Posey deserve that credit? We will just take a look closely but briefly at Willy Adames and Justin Verlander, and why ultimately I do think that Posey deserves a lot of the credit for what is going on. And we'll explain specifically what he's done differently that I think he deserves that credit for. Today's episode is brought to you in part by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team, of course the Dubs, or diving into player props. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into same-game parlays for a chance to win big. So don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. All right, as promised, we are going to get into why I think, even though this roster is so largely made up of players that Posey had nothing to do with acquiring, that I do think he deserves credit, but also why I think the previous regime kind of gets takes hits where maybe they didn't deserve it. Like if you like this team, if you like a lot of the players on this team, if you're enjoying watching Mike Yastremski hit splash hits, if you're enjoying Jung Hoo Lee, if you're enjoying Logan Webb, like this is all players acquired in the past. These are not like players that Buster Posey had anything to do with acquiring. And so it's just worth pointing that out. And it's not, again, I'm not trying to, I wish nothing but success for Posey. I hope the Giants win the World Series every single year in the next forever. You know, I'm always rooting for this team, but just trying to be objective. And I think that the previous regime did a good job with accumulating like depth of young talent, especially on the pitching side, and then like moves around the margins like Yastremski, Wade, and then some underrated free agent signings like Jung Hoo Lee, who's getting a chance to show what he can do now. So Willy Adames and Justin Verlander have been two of the worst players, like performance-wise, in the league thus far. If I'm just going to look at the batting leaders in 2025 among qualified players, I know that we're going to find Willy Adames towards the bottom. He's been the fourth worst player by Fangraphs WAR in baseball among qualified players, and that's a list that's made up of 180 players. So fourth worst out of 180 by Fangraphs wins above replacement. His weighted runs created plus is 37, so he's been 63% below average offensively. That ranks as the 18th worst number. Now, what I'm going to say is that it's 12 games, and I'm not worried. His defense hasn't graded out well in a small sample either. But again, small sample, I'm not really worried, but I would definitely like to see Willy Adames get going. And then Justin Verlander, if we look at pitchers, I'm just quite sure that we're going to see his ERA up there towards the worst in baseball. Fifth highest ERA among 78 qualified pitchers, Justin Verlander, with an ERA of 6.92. But as I kind of realized on air yesterday, his performance in that game, like you could see it with the way he was at times blowing people away. He had 9 strikeouts in 5 2/3, got through a really, really shaky third inning, shaky in the sense that it was tough to get out of because the Reds were just putting a lot of pressure on him. But I wanted to see what that expected ERA looked like after the game, like for the season. And so Verlander has a 6.92 ERA, but a 3.92 expected ERA. So sure enough, like Bob Melvin said it was one of the unluckier innings he's seen. And when I think back at it and look back at it, it's true. Like he was getting just ground balls that just found holes in that inning. And he was also, he threw like 98. And so Verlander said it's the best he's felt in years in that start. And so it's worth pointing out, I really liked and still like the Willy Adames signing. I'm less certain about Verlander, but that has more to do with the fact that he's 42 years old. Obviously a first ballot Hall of Famer, but you don't know exactly what you're going to get when a guy is 42. And I did explain that there could be a conundrum if Verlander like struggles all season. What do they do with him? And a ruthless front office would like cut him, but I don't see Buster Posey doing that to a player of his caliber, of Verlander's stature in the game. And plus he's going for 300 wins. He's like 40 away ish. 38 away. He doesn't have any yet with the Giants in 3 starts. But anyway, what has Posey done differently? Why do I think that he deserves credit? Even though, like I just said, Adames has been one of the worst position players in a small sample. I'm not worried. Verlander has been one of the worst pitchers by ERA, but I'm encouraged nonetheless. But still, results-wise, I know Willy won a game with a 2-out, 2-run hit. So he definitely like had his hands all over a win. If he doesn't come up with that hit, they lose. So, WAR doesn't take that into account. It just it's more objective. It's totally objective. It doesn't take situational. It's just a single in the eyes of something like wins above replacement. It's not factoring in how clutch of a single it was. That's it. It attempts to be objective, and it is. So what has Posey done differently? Well, what's happened in this first 12 games? 0 roster moves. No roster moves. It has been stability, and it has been a consistent lineup. It has not been platooning. It has just been trust in the players to go out there and play. And I think you're going to see that consistently over the course of the season. Buster Posey did an interview with Alex Pavlovich of NBC Sports Bay Area and said, look, there will be moves that get made, which is good to hear. Like, you got to make some moves at times, like Christian Koss, for example. Like, if he just doesn't do anything, then maybe you make a move there and go with like a Brett Wisely to give yourself a lefty off the bench as opposed to like all these righties off the bench. And also Spencer Bivens, maybe at some point it's Tristan Beck or Sean Jelly or Kyle Harrison, to take that spot instead. And then Hayden Birdsong getting moved into the rotation at some point seems like a deserving thing. But to me, it's a cultural thing. Like Willy Adames said, the reason he signed here was because of Buster Posey. And Willy Adames, while he hasn't, if you just look at the raw numbers, hasn't contributed a lot. Granted, again, that winning hit in the home opener, but culturally, Willy Adames has done a ton, I think. A ton. And that stuff doesn't get recorded in the numbers. And so I'm like a numbers-oriented person, but I can still see the impact of a Willy Adames. And they talk about it, players talk about it, about how Adames, one of the things that's critical is that he speaks good English. He's fluent in English and Spanish. And so Posey called him a connector of people, and that's part of it. And somebody even mentioned it, I think it was Yastremski, that if there are some players who feel like uneasy about speaking up because their English isn't so good, Adames has like encouraged them to speak up and try. And I think that just the attitude he brings every day, the energy he brings every day has been huge. And then the lack of roster moves, the faith in the players feeling like, okay, there's a former player running the show. It just relaxes them, I think. And so that's the effect. However, I think you want a combination of both, because it wasn't, you can't just take for granted having Landon Roop and Hayden Birdsong and Kyle Harrison and all these other young, talented pitchers coming up, and the moves like Yastremski and Wade and signing Flores and signing Jung Hoo Lee. Like, it takes a lot to build a good team. And I think the Giants are an underratedly good team, but it hasn't been just Posey. You've got to take into account that the roster was almost entirely constructed by the previous regime. So I just hope that moving forward, they can continue to make savvy moves like they've made over the last 6 years. But we'll see, because that was kind of a new thing that Farhan Zaidi brought to the table, and we don't know yet if Buster Posey and company are going to be able to do that, and it's going to take time to tell. So I just hope that they can keep the good thing going with the combination that all these 3 previous regimes and the 2 previous and 1 current have put together right now to lead this team to a 9-3 start with good vibes going on. So anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Once again, I'm Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter or X at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out so much, so thank you in advance. And thanks to everyone who's done so already. I cannot wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.